Under the scorching July sun, a humble young woman saves her wealthy boss's son from drowning, not imagining that this act would launch her into a labyrinth of secrets, humiliation, and unexpected alliances, where every gesture could redefine her destiny and her place in the heart of a family marked by loss. It was a suffocating afternoon in July, when the heat in San Antonio seemed to melt even the deepest shadows, and the sweet scent of honeysuckle mixed with the heavy summer air. Maria Sanchez, 24, was wiping the windows of the Hamilton mansion while listening to the crystal-clear laughter of the children playing in the pool. Maria had those green eyes that shimmered like emeralds in the sun, framed by long, thick lashes that seemed to brush her rosy cheeks every time she blinked. Her light brown hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, always pulled back in a simple braid while she worked. She was a young woman with a delicate but strong build, with small hands that showed the marks of honest work, and a smile that radiated kindness even in the most difficult moments. The daughter of humble farmhands from a small town in rural Texas, she had arrived in the city at just 18, carrying only a cardboard suitcase and a heart full of dreams that life had gradually crushed one by one. In her hometown, she had cared for her younger siblings after her mother fell gravely ill, sacrificing her studies and her aspirations to become a teacher. When her mother died, her father sank into alcoholism, and she had to seek work in the city to send money home. She had been working for the Hamilton family for 6 years, first as a kitchen helper, and then as a trusted housekeeper. In all that time, she had learned to become invisible, to move through the house like a silent shadow that cleaned, organized, and cared without truly being seen by those who inhabited those luxurious spaces. But inside her was a wound that bled in silence. The constant fear of never being seen as someone of true value, of being forever just the hired help. The Hamilton mansion stood imposing in the suburbs of Austin, with its pink limestone walls, its perfectly manicured gardens where hydrangeas and irises bloomed, and a spectacular view of the city that stretched to the horizon. It was a world of crystal and marble, of Persian rugs and crystal chandeliers, where every object cost more than Maria earned in an entire year. That day, as she wiped the windows of the main living room, Maria watched tenderly as the family's 2 children played in the pool. Sophia, 10, swam with the grace of a mermaid, while 6-year-old Daniel splashed happily in the shallow end. Little Daniel was especially dear to Maria. He had a contagious laugh and an innocent way of approaching her when she was sad, offering her drawings he made especially for Miss Maria. It was Daniel who most suffered the absence of his mother, Charlotte Hamilton, who had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Since then, the boy had constant nightmares and clung to any female figure who gave him affection. His father, William Hamilton, had become more distant and cold after the tragedy, taking refuge in the work of his bourbon distillery business and losing the ability to connect emotionally with his children. William Hamilton, 32, was a man who commanded respect with his presence alone, tall with an athletic build, black hair slicked back, and intense blue eyes that seemed to pierce the soul of anyone who dared to look directly at him. His face, carved in perfect lines, always wore a serious expression that he had learned to use as a shield against the world. He always wore impeccable designer suits, starched white shirts, and Italian shoes that shone like mirrors. He came from a traditional Texas family where honor and appearances were worth more than truth or feelings. His father had built the whiskey empire from scratch, and William had inherited not only the company but also the burden of maintaining a respected lineage in the highest circles of American society. Cold and reserved by nature, he carried a silent mourning for his deceased wife, a grief that had pushed him away from everyone, even his own children. But fate had other plans for that July afternoon. It was at that moment, under the relentless sun that made the pool water sparkle like liquid diamonds, that a gut-wrenching scream cut through the air like a sharp knife. A child's cry, desperate and full of terror that chilled Maria's blood. The scene unfolded in an instant that felt like an eternity. Daniel, in an attempt to reach a ball that was floating far from him, had lost his balance and fallen into the deep end of the pool. The little boy, who barely knew how to swim, was sinking and emerging desperately, swallowing water and screaming with what little voice he had left. Sophia, paralyzed by panic, screamed from the edge, not knowing what to do. Maria didn't think for a second. She dropped the cleaning cloth and ran towards the pool, jumping into the water without even taking off her shoes or apron. The cold water hit her like a shock against her warm body, but she had only one thing on her mind: to reach Daniel. She swam with all her might, fighting against the weight of her soaked clothes, until she reached the boy who was already starting to sink for the 3rd time. She hugged him tightly against her chest, feeling the desperate beats of his small heart. and swam towards the edge as Daniel coughed and cried, clinging to her as if she were his guardian angel. Once at the edge, she lifted him completely out of the water and stayed there, hugging him, soothing him with soft words as he regained his normal breathing. "It's okay, little one. It's okay. You're safe," Maria whispered, stroking the boy's wet hair as her own tears mixed with the water dripping from her face. What Maria didn't know was that this act of instinctive courage, which for her was simply a natural response of love for life, was going to put her on a path full of trials, secrets, and decisions that would change her destiny forever. William Hamilton had arrived home just as Maria was pulling Daniel out of the water. From the main entrance, he had witnessed the entire scene with a mix of terror and amazement. Seeing his son in danger had paralyzed his heart, but watching how that young employee had jumped in without hesitation to save him had stirred something deep inside him, something he had kept buried since Charlotte's death. Seeing Daniel in Maria's arms, wet, trembling, and with her still smiling despite the scare, something inside William broke. For the first time in 2 years, he felt a genuine emotion that wasn't pain or anger. But his upbringing, his social position, and his own fears prevented him from expressing the gratitude he felt in that moment. Instead, he approached with a firm step, took Daniel in his arms, and with a controlled but tense voice, said to Maria, "Take him inside and change your clothes. You can't be walking around the house soaking wet." Maria felt as if she had been slapped. She had hoped for at least a thank you, but she was met with her boss's usual coldness. With her eyes full of unshed tears, she nodded silently and headed towards the house, leaving puddles of water in her wake. That night, as she changed in her small servant's room, Maria couldn't help but feel hurt by William's reaction. She wondered if she had really done something wrong by saving Daniel, or if she simply didn't deserve even the slightest recognition for who she was. But the next day, things would get even worse. Mrs. Carmen Jones, the strict housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 20 years, had decided that the pool incident was a perfect opportunity to demonstrate her authority. Carmen was a 60-year-old woman, thin and severe, with her hair always pulled back in a tight bun and a perpetual expression of disapproval. She had a particular way of making the younger employees feel inferior, and Maria had always been one of her favorite targets. In front of all the staff gathered in the kitchen, and even more humiliatingly, in front of some guests who had arrived early for a business meeting, Mrs. Jones publicly accused Maria of neglecting her work duties by playing in the pool during work hours. "This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable," Carmen declared in a loud, clear voice, making sure everyone heard. "Domestic staff are here to work, not to have fun on the family's property." Maria Sanchez has shown a serious lack of professionalism and responsibility. Maria stood motionless, feeling the humiliation burn her cheeks. She could see the compassionate looks of her co-workers and the curious expressions of the guests. She wanted to explain what had really happened. She wanted to shout that she had saved Daniel's life, but the words got stuck in her throat. And the most painful thing of all was that William, who was present in the next room and had heard every word, remained silent. He didn't defend her, didn't clarify the situation, didn't say a single word in her favor. His silence was more hurtful than any direct insult. After that public humiliation, Maria retreated to her room and cried for the first time in many years. She cried for the injustice, for feeling invisible, for the ingratitude, but most of all she cried because a small part of her had hoped that maybe, just maybe, William would see her as something more than just an employee. However, fate had many more trials in store for both of them. Because although neither of them knew it yet, that afternoon at the pool had been only the first chapter of a story that would lead them down unexpected paths, where love, pride, family secrets, and the struggle for personal dignity would intertwine in ways neither of them could have imagined. Chapter 2. The days that followed the pool incident were marked by a silent tension that seemed to hang in the air of the Hamilton mansion like a thick cloud before a storm. Maria continued with her daily chores, but something had changed irreversibly in her. She no longer sang softly as she cleaned, as she used to, and her spontaneous smile had been replaced by a mask of distant professionalism. William, for his part, was in an internal battle he didn't fully understand. At night, when the silence of the house allowed him to think clearly, he couldn't get the image of Maria jumping into the water to save Daniel out of his mind. The instinctive bravery of that young woman, her willingness to risk her own safety without a second thought, had touched something in him that he had believed was dead since Charlotte's accident. But during the day, Surrounded by the expectations of his social position and the constant judgments of a society that watched his every move, William took refuge in the coldness he had perfected for years. It was easier to keep his distance than to face the complicated feelings he had begun to experience toward a housekeeper. Daniel, however, had developed a special attachment to Maria after the incident. The boy sought her out constantly, asked her to read him bedtime stories, and had started calling her "my angel Maria." Every show of affection from the little boy was like a balm for the young woman's wounded heart, but also an additional complication in an already delicate situation. It was Sophia, the older daughter, who finally told her father what had really happened that July afternoon. One night, during dinner, the 10-year-old girl broke the silence she had kept for weeks. "Dad," Sophia said, with that seriousness children sometimes adopt when they need to talk about important things, "why did Mrs. Jones scold Maria? She saved Daniel. If she hadn't been there, my brother would have drowned." William stopped chewing and looked up at his daughter. "What do you mean, Sophia?" "Daniel fell into the deep end of the pool and was drowning," the girl explained with tears in her eyes as she remembered the moment of terror. "I didn't know what to do. I was so scared, but Maria ran and jumped in with all her clothes on. She swam to Daniel and saved him. She was so brave, Dad. Why did they punish her when she was the hero?" The fork fell from William's hands. All those days, he had kept his distance from Maria, thinking that maybe Mrs. Jones was right, that maybe she had been careless or irresponsible. But now, hearing the full version of events from his own daughter's lips, he realized the terrible injustice he had allowed to happen. Daniel, who had been playing with his food, looked up and added in his clear little voice, "Maria is my guardian angel, Dad. She hugged me when I was really scared and told me everything would be okay. Guardian angels are good, right?" That night, William couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of his mansion, battling his own internal demons. He stopped in front of the door that led to the servants' quarters, where Maria's room was, and for a moment he considered knocking to apologize. But his pride and social prejudices were stronger than his sense of justice. Meanwhile, on the other side of that door, Maria was also awake. She had decided she could no longer stay in a house where her worth as a person wasn't recognized. She had started looking for another job, although the thought of leaving Daniel and Sophia, who had become a kind of family to her, pained her. On her bed was a letter of recommendation she had gotten through a friend to work for a family in San Jose that offered a better salary and better conditions, but something was stopping her from sending it. A part of her heart that she didn't want to admit had grown attached to that house, not just because of the children, but because of something more she didn't dare to name. The turning point came 2 weeks later, when William's sister, Patricia Hamilton Salinas, came to visit from Dallas. Patricia was a 40-year-old woman, elegant but with a sharp tongue and a tendency to meddle in matters that were none of her business. She had inherited the Hamilton family's classism to the nth degree and had a habit of treating the staff as if they were decorative objects. During the Sunday family lunch, Patricia decided it was the perfect time to advise her brother on the management of his domestic staff. "William, dear," Patricia began, delicately cutting her steak, "I think you've been too permissive with the help. I've noticed that girl, what's her name, Maria? She takes certain liberties that aren't appropriate for someone of her position." William frowned. "What are you talking about, Patricia?" "Well, I've seen how the children constantly seek her out, how they talk to her as if she were part of the family. That's not right, brother. Children need to understand social hierarchies from a young age. You can't let a domestic employee become a mother figure to them." Sophia, who was listening to the conversation, dared to interrupt. "But Aunt Patricia, Maria is very good to us. She helps us with our homework and tells us beautiful stories." Patricia gave the girl a cold look. "That's exactly what I mean, dear. Those aren't the duties of a domestic employee. That's what governesses and qualified nannies are for, not the hired help." William felt anger begin to boil in his veins, but before he could respond, Patricia continued her diatribe. "Besides, I've heard rumors at the country club about a certain incident at the pool. People are talking, William. They say you allow your employees to behave inappropriately. That's not good for your reputation or for the children's future." It was at that moment that Maria appeared in the dining room, bringing in dessert. She had heard part of the conversation from the kitchen, and although she tried to maintain her composure, her hands trembled slightly as she set the table. Patricia took advantage of Maria's presence to continue her attack, but this time addressing her directly. "Maria, right?" Patricia said with a fake smile. "I've been observing your behavior during my visit, and I think it's important that you understand your place in this house. You are not the children's nanny. You are not their confidant, and you are certainly not part of this family. You are a domestic employee, and it would be wise for you to behave as such." The silence that followed was deafening. Maria stood motionless with the dessert plates in her hands, feeling all eyes on her. She could see the compassionate expressions of her co-workers and the curiosity on the faces of the guests. For a moment, Maria considered simply nodding, apologizing and leaving. It would be the easiest, safest thing to do. But something inside her, something that had been growing since the day of the pool incident, rebelled against that humiliation. With a dignity that surprised even herself, Maria straightened her shoulders, gently placed the plates on the table, and addressed Patricia in a clear, firm voice. "You're right, Mrs. Salinas. I am a domestic employee. I come from a humble family. I work with my hands, and I earn my living by cleaning this beautiful house. But my job doesn't define my worth as a person, nor does it make me less deserving of respect and consideration." Patricia raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the response. Maria continued, now directing her gaze toward William. "I have worked in this house for 6 years with dedication and honesty. I have cared for these children as if they were my own siblings, not because it's my obligation, but because I love them. And when I saw Daniel in danger, I didn't think about my social position or the consequences. I thought only of saving an innocent child's life." Her voice broke slightly, but she continued with determination. "If that's behaving inappropriately, if loving and protecting these children is wrong, then maybe I really don't belong in this house." William had been petrified, watching that young woman who had worked silently in his house for years, and who was now revealing herself to him as a woman of extraordinary strength and dignity. Maria paused, took a deep breath, and added, "2 weeks ago, I received a job offer from another family. Her family that values honest work and treats its employees with the respect they deserve as human beings. I turned it down because I thought this was my place, that this was my family. But now I see I was wrong." Patricia was visibly annoyed at being confronted by a mere employee, but before she could respond, William did something that surprised everyone present. He got up from his chair, walked slowly toward Maria, and for the first time since the pool incident looked her directly in the eyes. "Maria," he said in a voice that trembled slightly, "you saved my son's life. You risked yourself without a second thought to protect what I love most in this world, and I wasn't even able to thank you. I allowed you to be humiliated for doing the right thing, for being brave when I was a coward." Patricia tried to interrupt, but William raised a hand to silence her. "My sister is right about one thing," William continued. "You are not just a domestic employee in this house. You are much more than that. You are the person who brought light back to my children's eyes, who has given them the motherly affection they lost when their mother died, and you are the bravest woman I have ever met." Maria's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed, while Daniel and Sophia watched the scene with a mixture of confusion and hope. "I don't want you to take that other job offer," William said, with a determination he hadn't shown in years. "I want you to stay, not as a domestic employee, but as what you really are, an essential part of this family." Patricia got up abruptly from the table, clearly indignant. "William, you've lost your mind. What will people say? What will society think?" William turned to his sister with a cold look. "Society, Patricia, didn't save my son's life. Maria did. And if that's not enough to understand who deserves my respect and my gratitude, then maybe you're the one who doesn't understand your place in this house." The silence that followed was different from the previous one. This time it was charged with possibilities, with changes that were coming, with hearts that were beginning to open after being closed for a long time. Maria, with tears she could no longer hold back, nodded slowly. "I'll stay, Mr. Hamilton, but not for the job or the salary. I'll stay because Daniel and Sophia need stability and because I need them too." In the days that followed, the dynamic of the house subtly changed. William began to find moments to talk to Maria, at first about the children, but gradually about more personal topics. He discovered she had an extraordinary natural intelligence, that she read voraciously in her spare time, and that she had dreams and ambitions that went far beyond domestic chores. Maria, for her part, began to see glimpses of the man William had been before grief hardened him. When he played with his children, or when he thought no one was watching, his face softened and his blue eyes shone with a tenderness that was a complete contrast to his public image. But the path to mutual understanding would not be easy. Social prejudices, past fears, and the complications of their different positions in life still represented enormous obstacles that both would have to face. Chapter 3. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in the dining room, and the Hamilton mansion had experienced subtle but significant changes. The children's laughter was heard frequently again, especially at night, when Maria told them fantastic stories of brave princesses and kind knights as she tucked them into bed. William had started coming home earlier from work, finding excuses to spend time with his children and, almost imperceptibly, with Maria. The young woman had blossomed during those months. Her confidence had grown, and she now participated more actively in decisions related to the children. William had insisted that she leave some of her heavier cleaning duties to other employees and focus more on the care and education of Daniel and Sophia. He had also started including her in informal family gatherings, something that did not go unnoticed by the rest of the household staff. Mrs. Jones, for her part, had adopted an attitude of silent resentment. The authority she once exercised over Maria had been undermined by the evident favor the master of the house showed her, and this filled her with bitterness. She had started looking for any opportunity to cause trouble, waiting for the perfect moment to regain her position of power. It was a rainy October afternoon when events took an unexpected turn. Austin was being hit by one of those tropical storms that turn streets into rivers and make the sky so dark it seems like night in the middle of the day. The wind beat against the mansion's windows with fury, and thunder rumbled like war drums in the distance. William had decided to stay home because of the bad weather, which was unusual for him, as he normally worked until very late, regardless of the weather. The children were particularly restless because of the storm, especially Daniel, who had developed a fear of thunder after the trauma of almost drowning in the pool. Maria had prepared hot chocolate for everyone and had managed to create a cozy atmosphere in the main living room, with soft blankets and stories that helped distract the little ones from the roar of the storm outside. William, watching from the doorway, felt enveloped by a sense of home he hadn't experienced since before Charlotte's death. It was during one of those moments of apparent tranquility that the phone rang. William answered, and his face gradually transformed from serene to worried, then to frankly alarmed. The call was from Robert Smith, a business partner and old family friend, who was in a desperate situation. His wife had gone into premature labor during the storm, and he urgently needed to get to the hospital, but the streets were completely flooded, and he couldn't get a ride. "William, please," Robert pleaded through the phone, his voice choked with anguish. "Anna is bleeding heavily, and the doctor says every minute counts. My car broke down this morning, and no taxi wants to go out in this weather. Could you help us?" Without a second thought, William agreed to go pick them up in his SUV, which had four-wheel drive, and could navigate the flooded streets better. But that meant he would have to leave the children during the storm, something he didn't want to do given their nervous state. Maria, who had heard the conversation, approached immediately. "You go, Mr. Hamilton. I'll stay with Daniel and Sophia. They'll be perfectly safe." William looked at her with a mix of gratitude and concern. "Are you sure? The storm seems to be getting worse, and if there's a problem—" "There won't be any problems," Maria replied with that quiet determination he had learned to admire. "The children need me here, and you need to help your friends. Go. Don't worry." William nodded, put on a raincoat, and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned to Maria and said something that surprised her. "I trust you completely. Thank you for taking care of what I love most in the world." Once William was gone, Maria dedicated herself to keeping the children entertained. She made them popcorn, organized board games, and when the thunder became more intense, she snuggled them next to her on the big living room sofa and started telling them a story about a brave princess who wasn't afraid of storms because she knew that after the rain, the sun always comes out. However, the tranquility was interrupted when the power went out completely, plunging the house into total darkness. Daniel started to cry in fear, and Sophia, though she tried to be brave, was visibly scared. Maria, keeping her calm, found candles and flashlights in the kitchen. She turned the power outage into an adventure, creating funny shadows with her hands on the wall and inventing stories about explorers who traveled through mysterious lands by the light of torches. "You know what?" she said with a smile as the candles flickered, creating a magical atmosphere. "This is the perfect opportunity to tell you the secret of why your dad is the bravest man I know." The children snuggled closer to her, intrigued by the promise of a story about their father. "When you were very little," Maria began, "and your mom was very sick in the hospital, your dad didn't leave her side for a single day. The doctors told him to go home and rest, but he stayed there taking care of her, talking to her, making sure she knew he loved her. And when she had to go to heaven, your dad cried a lot because he loved her so much." Sophia sighed deeply. "Is that why Dad is sometimes sad?" "Yes, my love. But you know what? Every time he sees you, his sadness gets a little smaller because you are the most beautiful gifts your mom left him. You are his love made real." Daniel, who had calmed down considerably, asked in his soft little voice, "Maria, do you love us like Mom loved us?" The question was like an arrow straight to Maria's heart. With tears in her eyes, She hugged both children and whispered, "I love you more than words can say. You are the children of my heart, even if not of my womb." It was at that moment of tenderness that they heard a strange noise coming from the upstairs. It wasn't the wind or the rain. It was the unmistakable sound of someone moving through the house. Maria felt her blood run cold. The doors were locked, and all the staff had left early because of the storm. It should only be the three of them in the house. "Children," Maria whispered in a calm but firm voice, "we're going to play a very special game. It's called The Silent Spies. I need you to stay here very quiet while I go check on something upstairs. Can you be my bravest spies?" The children, though scared, nodded. Maria hid them behind the big sofa, gave them a flashlight, and promised she would be back in 5 minutes. With her heart pounding like a drum, Maria took a candle and began to climb the stairs slowly. The steps creaked under her feet, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. The noise was coming specifically from William's study, a room she rarely had access to. As she approached the study, she could see a faint light filtering from under the door. Someone was definitely inside, using a flashlight. Carefully, she approached the ajar door and looked through the crack. What she saw took her breath away. Mrs. Jones was in front of William's desk, frantically going through documents and papers. She had a small camera in her hands and was photographing several contracts and letters. On the desk was an open safe, from which Carmen had extracted multiple important documents. Maria immediately realized she was witnessing a theft of confidential information, but what alarmed her most was seeing that Carmen also had family photographs and personal documents in her hands that had nothing to do with William's business. Without making a sound, Maria quickly returned to where the children were. Her mind was working at full speed, trying to decide what to do. She couldn't call the police because the phone lines were down due to the storm. She couldn't contact William for the same reason, and she couldn't risk confronting Carmen directly because that could endanger Daniel and Sophia. She decided that the most important thing was to protect the children and get evidence of the theft. Carefully, she took out her cell phone, which fortunately still had some battery, and crept back to the study. From the hallway, she managed to take several photos of Carmen in the act of stealing the documents. The images weren't of the best quality due to the low light, but they were clear enough to show what was happening. When Carmen finished photographing the documents and started putting everything back in the safe, Maria quickly returned to the children and kept them distracted until she heard the front door close. Carmen had left the house, taking valuable information and family secrets with her. 2 hours later, when William finally returned home soaked but relieved because he had managed to get Robert and Anna to the hospital on time, where they had a successful delivery, he found a nervous but determined Maria waiting for him in the living room. "Mr. Hamilton," she said to him once the children were in bed, "I need to tell you something very important that happened while you were gone." William immediately noticed the seriousness in her voice and sat down across from her, giving her his full attention. Maria told him everything she had witnessed, showing him the photos she had taken with her phone. As she spoke, William's face hardened, and his blue eyes turned cold as ice. "Carmen has been in this house for 20 years, William murmured, reviewing the photos again and again. "My father hired her personally. We trusted her completely. The photos show that she took copies of company contracts, but also personal documents and family photos," Maria explained. "I don't know what she wants them for, but it's clearly not good." William stood up and began to pace the room, processing the information. "These documents contain confidential information about corporate mergers we are planning. If they get into the hands of our competitors, they could cost the company millions of dollars." Then he stopped and looked directly at Maria. "But the most important thing is that you protected my children and got evidence of what was happening. Once again, you have shown extraordinary loyalty and courage." Maria blushed at the praise. "I just did what anyone would have done in that situation." "No," William replied, approaching her. "Not just anyone would have had the courage to investigate strange noises during a storm, risking their own safety to protect what wasn't theirs. Not just anyone would have had the presence of mind to get evidence while keeping 2 scared children safe." For the first time since they had met, William gently took Maria's hand in his. His hands were warm and strong, and the contact sent an electric current through the young woman's body. "Maria," he said in a soft voice she had never heard him use before, "every day that passes, I realize that you are an extraordinary person. Not just for your kindness or your courage, but for the way you have transformed this house. Since you came into our lives, everything is different, better." Maria's green eyes filled with tears as she looked at William's sincere face. For the first time, She could see beyond the mask of coldness he always wore. She could see the vulnerable man, the loving father, the widower who had fought his demons alone for so long. "Mr. Hamilton," she began to say, but he interrupted her gently. "William," he asked her. "When we're alone, call me William." "William," she repeated, feeling the name slide off her tongue like a caress. That is, these months have been—" She couldn't finish the sentence because emotions overwhelmed her. She had started to feel something for this man that went far beyond professional respect or gratitude. But she also knew that the obstacles between them were enormous. The difference in social classes, the expectations of society, and the fact that she was still officially his employee. William seemed to be struggling with the same feelings. He moved a little closer to her, and for a moment it seemed he was going to say something more, maybe to confess the feelings that had been growing in his heart. But at that moment, the phone rang shrilly, breaking the magic of the moment. It was one of William's colleagues, informing him about an emergency at the company that required his immediate attention. While William was on the phone, coordinating a response to the business crisis, Maria took the opportunity to retreat to her room. She needed time to process everything that had happened that night: Carmen's theft, the conversation with William, and above all, the emotional connection she had felt between them. That night, neither of them could sleep. William stayed in his study, analyzing what documents Carmen had stolen and the possible implications for his company. But his mind constantly drifted to Maria, her bravery, her dedication, the way her eyes sparkled when she smiled, and how it had felt when he took her hand. Maria, for her part, stayed awake looking out the window of her small room, watching the last raindrops fall softly on the garden. She knew something fundamental had changed between her and William that night, but she also knew that the path to any kind of future together would be full of complications that neither of them was perhaps prepared to face. What neither of them knew was that Carmen had not acted alone, and that the stolen documents were just the beginning of a much larger conspiracy that would threaten not only William's company, but also the safety of the entire family. Chapter 4. The days that followed the storm were marked by a different kind of tension in the Hamilton mansion. William had decided not to immediately confront Carmen about the theft, following his lawyer's advice to gather more evidence before taking legal action. Meanwhile, he had discreetly hired a private investigator to track the woman's activities and find out who she was working for. Carmen, unaware that she had been discovered, continued with her daily chores, maintaining a facade of normality. However, Maria had begun to notice small changes in her behavior: whispered phone calls, unexplained outings during her time off, and an even more hostile attitude towards her than before. The relationship between William and Maria had entered a delicate and complex phase. After the night of the storm, both were aware of the feelings that had begun to grow between them, but neither dared to take the first step. William fought against years of social conditioning that told him it was inappropriate to fall in love with a housekeeper, while Maria battled with the insecurity of not feeling worthy of a man's love in his position. However, the small daily interactions between them had taken on a different hue. When William came home from work, his eyes immediately searched for Maria. Their conversations about the children would extend longer than necessary, finding excuses to spend time together. He had started asking her about her reading, her opinions on different subjects, and had discovered that she had a brilliant and perceptive mind that had been underestimated for too long. Maria, for her part, had started to dress up a little more when she knew William would be home. She had bought a simple but elegant dress with her savings and had started wearing a soft gardenia perfume that had belonged to her mother. When William praised her for something or smiled at her genuinely, she felt as if her heart was going to jump out of her chest. Daniel and Sophia, with that special intuition children have, had begun to notice the subtle changes in the family dynamic. During dinners, they watched with curiosity as their father and Maria exchanged glances, and how both seemed happier when they were in the same room. One afternoon in November, as the leaves on the garden trees began to turn golden and crimson, Sophia decided to address the topic directly with Maria. The girl found her in the family library, where Maria usually spent time reading when her chores were done. "Maria," Sophia said with that seriousness children adopt when they want to talk about important things, "can I ask you something?" Maria closed the book she was reading, a novel by Flannery O'Connor she had borrowed from William's extensive collection, and smiled at the girl. "Of course, my love, what do you want to know?" Sophia sat on the armchair next to her and looked at her with her big dark eyes, so much like her father's. "Do you like Dad?" The question took Maria by surprise, and she felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "Of course I like your dad, Sophia. I respect him very much and—" "No," Sophia interrupted with a mischievous smile. I mean, do you like him the way people like each other in romantic movies, the way Mom liked Dad? Maria was speechless for a moment. How could she explain the complicated feelings she had developed for her father to a 10-year-old girl? How could she admit something she hadn't even dared to fully confess to herself? Sophia, she began carefully, adult feelings are sometimes very complicated. Your dad is a wonderful man, good, smart and loving. Any woman would feel lucky to... Then you do like him, Sophia concluded with satisfaction. I'm glad. Daniel and I have been talking and we think Dad likes you too. He smiles differently when you're around, and he's not sad all the time like he used to be. Maria felt as if her heart was going to explode. Do you really think that? I know it, Sophia replied, with the absolute confidence of childhood. And I think Mom would be happy. Before she died, she told me that the most important thing was for Dad, Daniel and me to be happy, and you make all of us happy. That night, Maria couldn't sleep thinking about Sophia's words. Was it possible that William felt something real for her? Or was she simply misinterpreting the gratitude and respect he had developed for her after everything she had done for his family? Her doubts intensified the next day when Patricia, William's sister, came to visit again, this time accompanied by an elegant and sophisticated woman she introduced as Isabella Martinez, a 30-year-old lawyer, single, and according to Patricia, the perfect candidate for William to rebuild his life. Isabella was everything Maria wasn't. Tall, elegant, with a college degree from a wealthy family in Dallas, and with social connections that could benefit William's business. She had perfectly styled black hair, wore designer suits, and spoke with the confidence that only comes from being born into privilege. William, dear, Patricia said during lunch while Maria served the table, feeling more invisible than ever. Isabella just returned from Europe, where she was studying international law. Isn't that fascinating? She would be a perfect intellectual companion for you. Isabella smiled with that perfect smile she had practiced for years at social events. Patricia has told me a lot about you, William. I hope we can get to know each other better during my visit. Maria watched how William interacted with Isabella for the next few hours. He was polite, educated, and clearly impressed by her intelligence and professional achievements. They talked about art, literature, international politics, subjects where Maria felt completely out of place. That afternoon, while Patricia and Isabella went shopping, Maria retreated to the garden, needing fresh air and space to process her emotions. She sat on the bench under the big oak tree, the same place where she used to sit when she needed to think or when she missed her hometown. It was there that William found her an hour later. He had taken off his tie and jacket and had a worried expression on his face. Mind if I sit with you? He asked. Maria nodded without looking at him directly. It's your garden, Mr. Hamilton. You can sit wherever you like. William, he corrected her gently. I asked you to call me William when we're alone. Sorry, she murmured. William. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the sound of the wind through the leaves and the singing of the birds that nested in the garden trees. Finally, William spoke. What do you think of Isabella? The question was like a dagger in Maria's chest. She's very intelligent and elegant. She seems like an appropriate woman for someone in your position. Appropriate, William repeated with a strange tone. Yes, I suppose she is. She has everything I'm supposed to look for in a partner. Education, social status, family connections. Maria felt tears begin to well up in her eyes, but she swallowed them with determination. Then you must be happy to have met her. William turned to her with an intense expression. Do I seem happy to you, Maria? She finally looked him in the eyes and was surprised by the anguish she saw in them. I don't know. Are you? No, he replied without hesitation. I'm not happy. And do you know why? Maria shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because all afternoon, while I was talking to a smart, successful, and socially appropriate woman, the only thing I could think about was another woman, a woman who reads poetry in the library when she thinks no one is watching, a woman who knows the most beautiful stories to calm the children's fears, a woman who risks her life to save others without a second thought. Maria's heart began to beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. A woman, William continued, moving closer to her on the bench, who has filled this house with light and joy, in a way I never thought would be possible after losing Charlotte. William, Maria whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You shouldn't say those things. You're the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, he interrupted, gently taking her face in his hands. And I have fallen in love with you, Maria Sanchez, hopelessly, completely in love. The tears she had been holding back finally streamed down Maria's cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I've been in love with you for months, but I thought it was impossible, that I could never. Nothing is impossible, William said, wiping her tears with his thumbs. If you love me and I love you, then we will find a way to make it work. It was then that they kissed for the first time, a soft, tender kiss, full of all the feelings they had been holding back for months. Maria felt as if the whole world had stopped, as if only the two of them existed under the blooming oak tree. When they pulled apart, William hugged her against his chest, and she could hear his heartbeats, strong and constant like a promise. "What are we going to do?" Maria asked against his chest. "Your sister society, the differences between us." "I don't know," William admitted. "But what I do know is that I don't want to live without you. I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore. I don't want to." They spent the rest of the afternoon hugging in the garden, talking about their feelings, their fears, their hopes. William told her about the constant pressure he felt from his family and society to maintain a certain image. Maria told him about her insecurities, how she sometimes felt unworthy of his love. "Never say that again," William said firmly. "Your worth is not measured by your bank account or your last name. It's measured by the kindness of your heart, by your intelligence, by your strength. And in all those things you are the richest woman I know." That night, at dinner, both Patricia and Isabella noticed the change in William. He was more relaxed, more smiling, more present than he had been all afternoon. Patricia attributed it to the positive effect of Isabella's company, but Isabella herself, who was an observant woman, noticed that William's eyes were not on her, but on the young woman serving the table. After dinner, as Maria was clearing the dishes, Isabella stopped her in the dining room. "Excuse me," she said in a polite but cold voice. "What is your name?" "Maria, ma'am," she replied respectfully. "Maria," Isabella repeated, studying her carefully. "Have you been working for the Hamilton family for a long time?" "6 years, ma'am." "I see. You must know the family very well, then." Maria nodded, feeling uncomfortable under the lawyer's scrutiny. "And what do you think of William?" Isabella asked in a seemingly casual manner. "As a boss, I mean." It was a trick question, and Maria knew it. "He's a good man and an excellent father," she replied carefully. Isabella smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Yes, he seems to be. Patricia has told me it's time for William to rebuild his life after his wife's tragedy. Men like him need an appropriate partner, don't you think? Someone of his same social and educational level." The message was clear. Isabella had noticed something and was marking her territory. "The children need stability," Maria replied diplomatically. "They deserve to be happy." "Of course," Isabella said. "And I'm sure you recognize how important it is that certain people can maintain their appropriate place in life for everyone's good." That night, Maria couldn't sleep. Isabella's words echoed in her mind like alarm bells. Was she right? Was she being selfish by allowing her feelings for William to flourish? What would happen to Daniel and Sophia if her relationship with their father caused a social scandal? The next day, Maria's doubts intensified when she overheard a conversation between Patricia and Isabella that was not meant for her ears. "I'm worried about William," Patricia was saying as they had tea on the terrace. "There's something different about him, and I can't put my finger on what it is." "I can," Isabella replied in a cold tone. "I've seen the way he looks at that domestic employee, and the way she behaves around him isn't appropriate for her position." Patricia gasped. "Are you implying that—" "I'm saying your brother is at risk of doing something crazy that would destroy his reputation and the children's future. Imagine the scandal. Whiskey tycoon falls for the Maid. The tabloids would have a field day." "That's ridiculous," Patricia said, but her voice sounded uncertain. "William would never—" "Widowed men are vulnerable," Isabella continued, "especially when a young woman is conveniently available and has been caring for their children. It's a cliché as old as time." Maria walked away from the window with a broken heart. Isabella's words, as cruel as they were, contained truths she couldn't ignore. What if she really was putting William and his children's future at risk? What if her love was selfish and destructive? That afternoon, when William tried to find her to continue the conversation they had started the day before, Maria avoided him. She kept busy with chores that would keep her away from him, and when she couldn't avoid being in the same room, she maintained a professional distance that confused and hurt him. "Maria?" he called her when he finally managed to find her alone in the kitchen that night. "What's wrong? Yesterday we talked about our feelings, and today you're acting like nothing happened." She didn't look up from the dishes she was washing. "I think we made a mistake yesterday, Mr. Hamilton. We got carried away by emotions in the moment." "Mr. Hamilton?" he repeated, hurt. "Are we back to that? Maria, look at me." When she finally looked at him, he could see tears in her eyes. "Yesterday you told me you loved me," he reminded her gently. "Was that a lie?" "No," she whispered. "It wasn't a lie. but that doesn't mean it's right or that it's possible. What has changed since yesterday? Maria took a deep breath, gathering the courage to say the words she knew would hurt them both. Your sister is right, your guest is right. You need an appropriate partner, someone who can be your equal, who won't be a scandal for your children. I don't care about that, William said vehemently. I don't care what people think. But you should care, Maria replied firmly. You have a company to run, children to raise, a reputation to maintain. You can't risk all of that for someone like me. Someone like you, William repeated, and there was anger in his voice now. You mean someone brave, kind, intelligent, loyal? Someone who loves my children as if they were her own? Someone who has helped me to live again after years of just existing? Maria's tears fell freely now. I mean someone without a formal education, without money, without an important family, someone who comes from a small town and who will always be seen as the domestic employee, no matter how much you love me. William tried to move closer to her, but Maria stepped back. Please, she begged him, don't make this any harder than it already is. Think about Daniel and Sophia. They deserve a future without complications, without scandals, without people pointing at them because of their father's decisions. My children love you, William said desperately. You are the mother figure they've had since Charlotte died. You can't ask me to give up the only woman I've loved since my wife. I'm not asking you to give up anything, Maria replied, although the words hurt like knives. I'm asking you to be realistic, to think about what's best for everyone, not just what we're feeling right now. That night, William locked himself in his study with a bottle of whiskey, fighting feelings of anger, pain, and frustration. How had he fallen in love with a woman who considered herself unworthy of his love? How could he make her understand that to him she was worth more than all the Isabellas in the world? Maria, for her part, stayed awake in her room, writing a resignation letter she knew she would have to hand in soon. She couldn't stay in that house knowing what she felt for William, seeing what she could never truly have every day. But neither of them knew that Carmen had been listening to their conversations for days, and that the information she had gathered about the feelings between the boss and the domestic employee would be the final piece she needed to execute a plan she had been preparing for months. They also didn't know that the private investigator hired by William had discovered something that would completely change the situation. Carmen had not only stolen company documents, but had been working for Ralph Jones, Patricia's cousin, and a business rival of the Hamilton family, who had been planning a smear campaign that included destroying William's personal reputation. The storm that was brewing would be much more intense than any weather storm they had faced until then. Chapter 5. Saturday morning dawned with grey skies that seemed to reflect the gloomy mood that had enveloped the Hamilton mansion for the past few days. William had spent the night awake, going over the reports from the private investigator he had hired to track Carmen's activities. What he had discovered was far worse than he had initially imagined. Carmen Jones was not simply a disloyal employee who had stolen documents for money. She was, in fact, the younger sister of Ralph Jones, Patricia's cousin who had been aggressively competing against the Hamilton company for years. The investigation had revealed that Carmen had been planted in the house from the beginning, 20 years ago, for the purpose of spying on the family's business operations. But most alarming of all was that the initial corporate espionage plan had evolved into something much more personal and destructive. According to the investigators' reports, Ralph Jones had decided that the most effective way to destroy William was to attack his personal reputation, not just his business. Carmen had been gathering intimate information about the family for years: private photographs, personal letters, details about the children's daily routines, and had even installed recording devices in several rooms of the house. All of this as part of an elaborate plan to create a scandal that would forever ruin the Hamiltons' prestige in Austin society. William closed the folder with the reports and massaged his temples, feeling the weight of the betrayal and manipulation that had been happening under his own roof for 2 decades. His father had trusted Carmen completely, and she had been selling family secrets from day one. But there was something else in the report that filled him with a cold, calculating fury. The investigator had intercepted communications indicating that Carmen was preparing a final blow that would involve compromising photographs and audio recordings that would supposedly show William in inappropriate situations with the domestic staff. He didn't have to guess who they were referring to. Carmen had been documenting every interaction between him and Maria, waiting for the perfect moment to use that information against him. William's phone rang, interrupting his gloomy thoughts. It was his lawyer, Robert Peterson, with news that would confirm his worst fears. "William," Robert said without preamble, "we need to meet immediately. I've received information that Ralph Jones plans to publish a defamatory article in the Austin Post this Monday. He apparently has photographs and recordings he intends to use to destroy your reputation. What kind of photographs? William asked, although he already knew the answer. According to my sources, they are images that supposedly show you in an inappropriate relationship with a domestic employee. It also mentions recordings of private conversations they would have obtained illegally. William felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Robert, those photographs and recordings were obtained by Carmen Jones, who has been spying for Ralph for 20 years. I have evidence of her betrayal. I know, Robert replied. But that won't stop them from publishing the article. In fact, they're using the angle that you discovered the supposed inappropriate relationship and fired Carmen to silence her. It's a very convincing narrative for the public. How much time do we have? 48 hours, maybe less. William, you need to make a quick decision. We can try to get a court order to stop the publication, but that will only delay the inevitable and create more media attention. Or what? Or you can get ahead of the story. Make a public statement that controls the narrative before they control it for you. After hanging up the phone, William went to the garden, needing fresh air to clear his mind. It was there that he came across a scene that completely disarmed him. Maria was sitting on the bench under the oak tree, with Daniel in her lap and Sophia by her side. She was reading them a fairy tale, but all three had sad expressions. When he got close enough to listen, he realized it was the story of Cinderella, but Maria had modified it in a way that broke his heart. And then Cinderella realized that even though the prince loved her very much, and she loved him, Maria was saying in a soft, melancholic voice, sometimes love isn't enough to overcome all the differences. So she decided it was best to go back to her simple life and let the prince marry someone appropriate from his kingdom. But that's not fair, Daniel protested with tears in his eyes. If they loved each other, they should have been together. Sometimes, my little prince, Maria replied, stroking his hair, loving someone means making sacrifices to protect their happiness, even if that means we can't be with them. Like when you're going to leave? Sophia asked in a choked voice. William felt as if the world stopped. Was Maria going to leave? Why do you think I'm going to leave? Maria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Because you've been very sad lately, Sophia explained, and because I heard Aunt Patricia and Mrs. Martinez talk about how some people need to know their place, and because you put your suitcase under the bed like when you first got here. William moved closer, remaining hidden behind a tree to hear the rest of the conversation. My loves, Maria said in a trembling voice, sometimes in life we have to make difficult decisions. I love you more than my own life, but there are complicated situations that you can't understand yet. Is it because of Dad? Daniel asked with that direct intuition children have. Because he likes you and you like him? Maria gasped. Why do you think that? Because he smiles differently when you're around, Sophia explained, and because you get nervous when he's in the room, and because you both seem sad when you're not together. Daniel and I have been talking, Sophia continued seriously, and we think it would be nice if you were our new mum, not to replace Mum Charlotte, but to be our mum of the heart. Tears began to roll down Maria's cheeks. Oh, my beautiful children, you are already the children of my heart, and you always will be, no matter where I am. Then don't go, Daniel pleaded, hugging her tightly. Please don't leave us. It was at that moment that William decided he had heard enough. He came out from behind the tree and approached the group with determination. Maria, he said softly, can we talk alone? The children looked at him with hope, as if his arrival could solve all the problems. Maria, however, seemed petrified. Daniel, Sophia, William said, can you go inside to play for a moment? I need to talk to Maria about something important. Once the children were gone, William sat on the bench next to Maria. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Is it true you're going to leave? William finally asked. Maria nodded without looking at him. I think it's for the best for everyone, including for you. What I want doesn't matter, she replied. What matters is what's right. William made a decision. It was time to tell her everything, about Carmen, about the conspiracy, about the article that was going to be published. She had the right to know that her reputation was also in danger. Maria, he began, taking her hands in his, there are things you need to know, things that will change this whole situation. For the next hour, William told her everything, about Carmen's true identity, about the years of spying, about Ralph's plan to destroy his reputation, using the relationship between them as a weapon. They have photographs of us in the garden, he explained, recordings of our conversations, all obtained illegally, but that won't matter when the story is published. Maria paled. What kind of photographs? Probably from the day we kissed under this tree, maybe from other times we've been talking here. They've been taken out of context to make it look like we've been having an affair for years. This is horrible, Maria whispered. Your reputation, your company, the children, all because of me. No, William said firmly. None of this is your fault. This is the result of years of malicious planning by people who want to destroy my family. But if we hadn't fallen in love, William completed, they would have found another way to attack. These people have been planning this for 20 years, Maria. You just gave them a new tool, but they would have found another one. Maria stood up from the bench and began to pace in circles, her mind working quickly. What options do we have? She asked. My lawyer says we can try to legally stop the publication, but that will only delay things. Or we can get ahead of the story and control the narrative ourselves. What does that mean? William took a deep breath before answering. It means we can make a public statement admitting our relationship before they reveal it. We can present our version of events. And if we do that, Maria asked, what would happen? Honestly, there would be a scandal anyway. People would talk. Some clients might pull out of the company. Charlotte's family might get upset. But at least we would have control over how the story is told. Maria stopped in front of him. What if I just disappear? If I leave the city? If no one can find me, maybe the story will lose steam. No, William said, standing up as well. I'm not going to let you run away. I'm not going to let you sacrifice your life to protect mine. And you won't let me sacrifice my reputation to protect yours. Maria, he said, taking her face in his hands, listen to me carefully. I love you. I love your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, your courage. I love the way you have transformed this house and my heart. And if I have to choose between keeping you in my life and keeping the approval of a hypocritical society, I choose to keep you 1,000 times over. But the children love you. You just heard what they said. They want you to be a part of this family officially, and I want that too. Maria stood still. What are you saying? William knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I'm asking you to marry me, Maria Sanchez. Not for convenience, not to solve this scandal, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Because I want you to be the official mother of my children and the partner for the rest of my life. Tears streamed freely down Maria's face. William, this is crazy. In the middle of all this crisis, with everything that's happening, precisely because of that, he replied. Life is unpredictable and uncertain. I've learned that the most painful way. I'm not going to waste any more time pretending I don't love you or waiting for the appropriate moment. I love you now, in this moment, in these circumstances. What if no one accepts our marriage? What if we lose everything? Then we'll build something new together. You and I and the children. We don't need anyone else's approval to be happy. Maria looked into William's blue eyes, those eyes she had learned to love, which she had seen transform from cold and distant to warm and full of life. She saw in them absolute sincerity, unconditional love, and a determination she hadn't seen before. Are you sure? She whispered. Completely sure this is what you want? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he replied without hesitation. Then yes, Maria said, her voice growing in strength and conviction. Yes, I will marry you, William Hamilton, because I also love you more than my own life, and because I believe that together we can face any storm. They kissed in the garden, under the same oak tree where they had confessed their love for the first time, but this time the kiss was different. It was a kiss of commitment, of decision, of two people who had chosen to face the world together. However, as they hugged, neither of them realized that Carmen was watching them from a second-floor window, with a camera in her hands and a malicious smile on her face. The photograph she had just taken would be the cover of the article that would be published the next day. The war had begun, but William and Maria would face any battle that came together. That night, William gathered the whole family in the main living room. Patricia and Isabella were present, as well as Daniel and Sophia. It was time for everyone to know the truth. Family, William began, taking Maria's hand. I have some important announcements to make. Chapter 6. The silence that followed William's announcement was so dense it seemed to have physical weight. Patricia was frozen in her chair, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips, while Isabella had visibly paled. The only ones who showed genuine joy were Daniel and Sophia, who immediately ran to hug Maria. Are you really going to marry Dad? Daniel asked with eyes shining with excitement. Are you going to be our official mom? If you accept me, Maria replied, kneeling to be at the children's level, it would be the greatest honor of my life to be your mum of the heart. Of course we accept you, Sophia exclaimed, hugging her tightly. We've been waiting for this. It was Patricia who finally broke the silence, in a voice trembling with disbelief and fury. William, she said slowly, Please tell me this is some kind of sick joke. It's no joke, Patricia, William replied calmly, holding Maria's hand firmly in his. I'm completely serious. I have asked Maria to marry me, and she has accepted. Patricia stood up abruptly, spilling coffee on her designer dress. Have you completely lost your mind? Do you have any idea of the scandal this is going to cause? Of the damage you'll do to the family's reputation? The family's reputation is already under attack, William replied. And not because of anything we've done wrong, but because of the jealousy and revenge of other people. It was then that he told them the whole truth about Carmen, about Ralph Jones, about the years of spying, and the plan to destroy the family. As he spoke, Patricia's expression gradually changed from anger to shock, and finally to horror. Carmen, Patricia whispered when William finished explaining. Carmen has been spying for Ralph all these years, but she helped me plan Charlotte's funeral. She comforted the children when they were devastated. How could she? People are capable of anything when they're motivated by money and revenge, William said sadly. Carmen has been playing a role for 20 years. Isabella, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. William, I understand you feel betrayed and confused by all this, but marrying her, she said, pointing disdainfully at Maria, isn't going to solve anything. In fact, it's just going to confirm all the accusations they plan to make against you. I'm not marrying Maria to solve the crisis, William replied firmly. I'm marrying her because I love her, because she loves my children, and because I want to spend the rest of my life with her. And what about the company? Patricia demanded. What about everything Dad built? What about the family legacy? The company will survive, William said, and if some clients decide to leave because they don't approve of my choice of wife, then they weren't the kind of clients we'd want anyway. Isabella stood up elegantly, smoothing her skirt. Patricia, I think it's obvious that my presence here is no longer necessary or welcome. William has clearly made his decision, no matter how destructive it may be. She headed for the door, but stopped and turned to Maria. I hope you understand what you're getting yourself into, she said in a cold voice. Austin High Society doesn't forgive these kinds of transgressions. Your life will never be easy as William Hamilton's wife. I'm not looking for an easy life, Maria replied with dignity. I'm looking for an authentic life, full of love and purpose, and that's exactly what I've found here. After Isabella left, Patricia slumped back into her chair, putting her hands on her head. William, she said in a broken voice, I understand that you think you love this girl, but have you really thought about the consequences? The children are going to suffer. They're going to be pointed at in school. They're going to hear cruel comments about their stepmother. The children are going to grow up knowing that their father chose love over fear, William replied. They are going to learn that people's worth is in their character, not in their bank account or their last name. Sophia, who had been listening to the entire conversation, approached her aunt. Aunt Patricia, she said in her serious little voice, Maria has taken care of us when we've had nightmares. She's helped us with our homework. She's taught us to be brave. Isn't that what a good mom does? Patricia looked at her niece, and then at Daniel, who nodded vigorously in agreement with his sister. Slowly, something in her expression began to change. Maria, Patricia said finally, addressing her directly for the first time in the conversation, can you promise me that you will love and protect these children as if they were your own? I promise, Maria replied without hesitation. I would give my life for them. And can you promise me that you won't let this scandal affect them more than necessary? I will do everything in my power to protect them and keep them happy and safe, Maria promised. Patricia sighed deeply. Then I suppose I have to support this decision, no matter what I personally think about it. The next day, just as William's lawyer had predicted, the article appeared on the front page of the Austin Post. The headline read, Scandal in the Suburbs. Whiskey Tycoon has romance with domestic employee while investigating alleged betrayal. The photograph showed him and Maria kissing in the garden, with text that insinuated the relationship had been going on for years, while William persecuted a loyal employee. But William was already prepared. An hour after the newspaper went on sale, he and Maria appeared at a press conference he had organized the night before. Good morning, William began, with Maria standing by his side, both elegantly but excessively dressed. I have called this conference to clarify some facts that have been misrepresented in today's press. For the next 30 minutes, William presented all the evidence about Carmen's betrayal, Ralph Jones's spying, and the smear campaign that had been going on for years. He showed documents, recordings, and testimonials from the private investigator. I also want to clarify, William continued, that although my personal relationship with Miss Maria Sanchez began recently, My feelings for her are completely genuine and honorable. For that reason, I have asked her to marry me, and she has accepted." A murmur of surprise ran through the room full of journalists. "Maria Sanchez," William said, turning to her, "is a woman of exceptional character who has cared for my children with dedication and love for years. She saved my youngest son's life. She has protected my family from external threats, and she has brought light and joy back to our home after years of pain." Then he handed the microphone to Maria, who had been terrified of speaking in public, but who had practiced her speech all night. "Good morning," she began in a trembling voice that gradually grew firmer. "My name is Maria Sanchez, and it is true that I have worked as a domestic employee for the Hamilton family for 6 years. It is also true that I have fallen in love with William Hamilton, and that he has fallen in love with me." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I come from a humble family in rural Texas. I don't have a college degree or an important last name, but I have something I consider much more valuable, a heart full of love for this family, and the determination to protect and care for it with my life." Her voice grew even stronger as she continued. "I know that some people will question this marriage. They will say that I am not appropriate for William, that I don't belong in his world. Maybe they are right about some things, but what I do know is that I love this man and his children more than my own life, and that they love me. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that truly matters." The journalists' questions were direct and sometimes hostile, but both William and Maria faced them with honesty and dignity. When a journalist asked if she didn't feel uncomfortable about the difference in social classes, Maria replied, "The only discomfort I feel is living in a society that judges people's worth by their bank account instead of their character. I hope that my marriage to William can help change that mentality, even in a small way." The days that followed the press conference were difficult. There were criticisms on social media. Some clients cancelled contracts, and the family received unpleasant phone calls, but there were also positive surprises. Many working women identified with Maria's story and defended her publicly. Several news outlets praised William's courage for choosing love over social conventions, and unexpectedly, many clients expressed admiration for his honesty and authenticity. Carmen was arrested for industrial espionage and theft. During the trial, the full extent of Ralph Jones's conspiracy was revealed, and he also faced criminal charges. The evidence was so overwhelming that both were sentenced to prison. William and Maria's wedding was celebrated 3 months later in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's garden, under the same oak tree where they had first confessed their love. Daniel and Sophia were the bridesmaids and groomsmen, and Patricia, who had come to genuinely respect Maria during those months, helped plan the ceremony. Maria wore a simple but elegant ivory dress, with garden flowers in her hair. William couldn't stop smiling as he watched her walk toward him. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye among those present. "Maria," William said during his vows, "you taught me that true love knows no social or economic boundaries. You taught me that a person's worth is measured by the generosity of their heart, not by the size of their bank account. I promise to love and respect you every day of my life, and I promise that together we will build a home full of love, respect, and joy." "William," Maria replied with tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks, "you gave me a family when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I didn't deserve it. You gave me the opportunity to be a mother to 2 extraordinary children. I promise to be your partner in all of life's adventures, your support in difficult times, and your celebration in moments of joy." A year later, William and Maria were sitting on the same garden bench, but this time Maria was holding their newborn baby, a girl they had named Charlotte, in honor of William's first wife. Daniel and Sophia, now 7 and 11 respectively, adored their new little sister and had completely adopted Maria as their mother. The company had not only survived the scandal, but had grown. The honesty and authenticity William had shown during the crisis had attracted new clients who valued integrity over superficial appearances. Maria had started studying at night, pursuing the dream of becoming a teacher that she had abandoned years ago. William supported her completely, caring for the children when she had classes and studying with her when she needed help. "Do you ever regret it?" Maria asked William one afternoon as they watched the children play in the garden. "Regret what?" he replied, surprised by the question. "Marrying me. All the drama, the criticism, the problems I caused." William looked at her with disbelief and then laughed softly. "Maria, my love, you didn't cause any problems. You were the solution to all my problems. Before you, this house was a cold museum full of people who were just existing. Now it's a home full of life, love, and joy." He pointed to the children, who were building a fort with blankets under the oak tree. "Look at Daniel and Sophia. When was the last time you saw them so happy and secure? And look at our little Charlotte," he added, gently stroking the baby's cheek. "She's going to grow up in a home where love is valued above all else. Besides," he continued with a mischievous smile, "my company has never been more prosperous. It turns out that honesty is good for business." "Who would have thought?" Maria laughed, feeling happiness fill her completely. "You know what's the most ironic thing about all this?" "What?" "That when I was little, I used to dream of being the hero of a fairy tale. I wanted to be rescued by a prince and live happily ever after in a castle. And it turns out I didn't need to be rescued. I needed to find someone to rescue too, someone who was just as lost as me but in a different way." William nodded understandingly. "We rescued each other." "Exactly. And the castle," Maria added, looking around the beautiful garden and mansion. "It turns out it's not a place. It's a feeling. It's being home with the people you love and who love you unconditionally." That night at family dinner, Daniel asked a question that made everyone laugh. "Dad, Maria," he said while playing with his spaghetti, "when Charlotte grows up, are you going to tell her how you met?" "Of course," William replied. "We'll tell her the whole story." "Even the part where Maria jumped into the pool to save me?" "Especially that part," Maria confirmed, "because that's where it all began." "And the part where Aunt Patricia didn't want you to get married?" "That part too," William said, looking at Patricia, who now visited regularly and had developed a genuinely affectionate relationship with Maria. "And the part where the newspapers said bad things?" "Yes, Daniel," Maria replied softly. "We're going to tell her the whole story, the good parts and the difficult parts, because the important thing isn't that life is perfect, but that we face challenges with love and courage." Sophia, who had been listening silently, asked, "And are you going to live happily ever after?" William and Maria looked at each other, exchanging one of those smiles that only truly in love couples share. "My love," Maria said, "we are already living happily ever after. Every day we wake up together as a family, every problem we face united, every joy we share. That is our happily ever after." "Because it turns out happily ever after," William added, "doesn't mean we'll never have problems. It means that no matter what problems come, we face them together, with love and determination." And so in a mansion in the Austin suburbs, under an oak tree that had witnessed tears, confessions, promises, and kisses, a family had learned that true love knows no social barriers, that dignity cannot be bought with money, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from the most unexpected beginnings. The woman who once thought she would never be seen as someone of worth had found a man who saw her as the most precious treasure in his life. And the man who had closed his heart to pain had discovered that opening it to love was the only way to truly live. Because in the end, this was not just a story about a domestic employee and a millionaire. It was a story about two souls who found each other at the exact moment they needed each other most, and who chose to build a love that defied all expectations and overcame all obstacles. And they lived, if not exactly like in fairy tales, in a much better way. They lived with purpose, with passion, with real problems and authentic joys, surrounded by a family that had learned that love is the only wealth that truly matters.